The piercing cry of a baby shattered the afternoon silence across the Montana prairie, where Rosalie O'Brien knelt in the tall grass, her tears mingling with the dirt on her cheeks as she tried desperately to calm her wailing infant. The broken wagon wheel and her dwindling supplies spelled certain doom if help didn't arrive soon, and the late September winds of 1875 were growing colder by the hour. Cole Reeves heard the cries before he saw them. He'd been tracking a small herd of mustangs for the better part of 2 days when the unmistakable sound of a baby's distress reached him. Urging his chestnut gelding forward, he crested a small rise and spotted them, a young woman with copper hair tumbling from a once neat bun, hovering protectively over a bundle wrapped in a faded quilt. "Hello there," he called out, approaching slowly to avoid startling her. "Seems you might be in need of some assistance, madam." Rosalie's head snapped up, her green eyes wide with both hope and suspicion. Strangers in this territory could mean salvation or danger. She clutched her 3-month-old daughter Emma closer to her chest. "Our wagon broke down yesterday," she explained, her voice hoarse from thirst. "My husband went for help and hasn't returned." Cole dismounted, noting the woman's chapped lips and the baby's increasingly frantic cries. He unbuttoned his heavy canvas coat without hesitation and spread it on the ground beside them. "Let me help you both," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "That little one needs shelter, and so do you." When Rosalie hesitated, Cole added, "I'm heading to Pinecrest, about 15 miles northeast. There's a decent doctor there who can look after you and your baby." A particularly fierce gust of wind made her decision for her. Nodding gratefully, Rosalie allowed Cole to wrap his coat around her and Emma. With surprising tenderness for a man with such weathered hands, Cole lifted both mother and child onto his horse before mounting behind them. "I'm Cole Reeves," he said as he nudged his horse forward. "Horse trainer by trade." "Rosalie O'Brien," she replied, relaxing slightly as the baby's cries softened into whimpers. "And this is Emma. We were heading to join my sister in Billings." "What about your husband?" Cole asked, scanning the horizon for any sign of another traveler. Rosalie stiffened. "Thomas left yesterday morning, said he'd walk to the nearest town for help." Her voice cracked. "But I don't think he's coming back. We'd been arguing for days. He didn't want to make this journey in the first place." Cole remained silent, but his jaw tightened. Abandoning a wife and infant in the wilderness was beyond contemptible. He'd seen too many good women left to fend for themselves in these territories, victims of men who found frontier life harder than expected. As they rode, Rosalie gradually revealed more of her story. She'd married Thomas O'Brien 2 years earlier in St. Louis, where she'd worked as a schoolteacher. When Emma was born, Thomas grew restless and resentful of the responsibility. Rosalie's sister Martha had written about teaching opportunities in Billings, and Rosalie had convinced Thomas it could be a fresh start for their family. "Fool that I was," she said bitterly. "I believed him when he said he wanted that too." By late afternoon, they reached a small creek where Cole suggested they rest. He helped Rosalie dismount, noticing how she winced as her feet touched the ground. "Your boots are worn through," he observed, frowning at the blood-stained leather. "I gave most of my good things to Thomas to trade for supplies," she admitted. "He came back with whiskey more often than flour." Cole's expression darkened, but he said nothing as he gathered wood for a small fire. While Rosalie fed Emma, he prepared a simple meal of jerky and beans from his saddlebags. "We'll reach Pinecrest by noon tomorrow," he said, passing her a tin cup of hot coffee. "The general store there has decent supplies. You can get what you need before deciding your next move." Rosalie looked up, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "Why are you helping us, Mr. Reeves?" Cole stared into the flames. My mother and I were abandoned by my father when I was 8. We nearly died crossing the Nebraska territory before a Pawnee family found us. He met her gaze. No one should face the wilderness alone, especially not with a child. That night, Cole gave Rosalie his bedroll and kept watch from the other side of the fire. Despite her exhaustion, sleep eluded her as she contemplated her uncertain future. Thomas had taken most of their money, and her teaching credentials would mean little without proper references. The next morning, as they continued their journey, Emma seemed more settled, occasionally cooing when Cole spoke in his deep, gentle voice. Rosalie noticed how naturally he adjusted his riding to keep the baby comfortable, and how his eyes constantly scanned their surroundings for potential threats. "You're good with children," she remarked. Cole's face softened. "I helped raise my brother's kids after he and his wife died of fever 5 years back. They're with my mother in Denver now, but I visit when I can." They reached Pinecrest shortly after midday. The small settlement consisted of a main street with a general store, saloon, doctor's office, and a handful of other buildings. Cole led them directly to Doc Wilson's residence, a 2-story wooden structure with peeling white paint. The doctor, a gray-haired man with kind eyes, examined Emma thoroughly before pronouncing her healthy but slightly dehydrated. He gave Rosalie a tonic for the infant and treated the blisters on her feet. "You're welcome to stay with my wife and me for a few days," Doc Wilson offered, noting Rosalie's evident fatigue. "We've got a spare room since our daughter married last spring." Cole, who had been standing quietly by the door, cleared his throat. "I'll see about getting your wagon retrieved and repaired, Mrs. O'Brien. Please call me Rosalie," she said, surprising herself with the invitation to familiarity. "And I can't ask you to do more than you already have." "You didn't ask," he replied simply. "I offered." Over the next several days, Cole organized a small party to recover Rosalie's wagon and belongings. The wheel was indeed broken beyond repair, but the local blacksmith agreed to fashion a new one. Most of her possessions were intact, though some food had been spoiled by pests. During this time, Rosalie found herself constantly looking for Cole around town. He'd secured a room at the boarding house, but spent most daylight hours working with local ranchers, breaking horses to earn extra money. "He's asked about train schedules to Billings," Mrs. Wilson mentioned one evening as they prepared dinner. "I think he's concerned about how you'll complete your journey." Rosalie's hand stilled over the potatoes she was peeling. The truth was, she'd been reconsidering her plans. Her sister's last letter had mentioned that the teaching position might already be filled, and the idea of starting over in yet another unfamiliar place without support was becoming less appealing. "Pinecrest needs a teacher," Doc Wilson added, seeming to read her thoughts. "The town council's been trying to establish a proper school for months." That night, after Emma was asleep, Rosalie sat on the Wilsons' porch and gazed at the stars. The September chill had a bite to it, but wrapped in a borrowed shawl, she found it refreshing rather than threatening. "Mind if I join you?" Cole's voice came from the bottom of the steps. She smiled and gestured to the empty chair beside her. "Your timing is perfect. I've been wanting to thank you properly." "No need for that," he said, settling into the chair. "Your wagon's ready." Blacksmith did a fine job on the wheel. Rosalie took a deep breath. "I've been thinking about staying in Pinecrest at least for a while. Dr. Wilson says they need a teacher." Cole nodded, his expression unreadable in the dim light. "It's a decent town, growing. Safe enough for a woman on her own. Would you?" She hesitated, suddenly uncertain. "Would you be staying too?" "I've got work lined up through winter," he said. "Rawlins Ranch needs their horses trained, and they've offered me the use of a cabin on their property." The conversation lapsed into comfortable silence, but Rosalie felt a new awareness between them. Cole had become more than a rescuer. He was becoming a friend, perhaps something more if the flutter in her chest was any indication. The next morning, news arrived that changed everything. A hunting party returned to town with a grim discovery. They'd found a man's body about 10 miles south, killed by what appeared to be a gunshot wound. The description matched Thomas O'Brien. Rosalie identified her husband's personal effects with a strange detachment. The sheriff determined that Thomas had likely been murdered by bandits known to operate in the area. They'd taken his boots, gun, and the silver watch that had belonged to his father. He was a fool, but he didn't deserve that, Rosalie whispered to Cole as they left the sheriff's office. Cole placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. Few men deserve such an end, regardless of their failings. The town rallied around Rosalie in her unexpected widowhood. The local seamstress provided black ribbons for her to wear, though full mourning seemed excessive for a man who had abandoned her. The town council officially offered her the teaching position, with a small house included as part of her compensation. 2 weeks after her arrival in Pinecrest, Rosalie stood in her new home, a modest 2-room structure with a vegetable garden out back. The townspeople had contributed furniture, kitchenware, and even a small cradle for Emma. Cole appeared at her door that evening with a rocking chair strapped to his horse. "Every teacher needs a proper chair for reading," he said, carrying it inside and positioning it near the hearth. "It's not fancy, but it's solid." Rosalie ran her hand over the smooth wooden arm. "It's perfect." "Thank you." Their eyes met, and for a moment, Rosalie thought he might say something more. Instead, he tipped his hat and departed with a promise to check on them in a few days. As autumn deepened into winter, Rosalie settled into her role as Pinecrest schoolteacher. The town had converted an abandoned store into a schoolhouse, and 14 children aged 6 to 15 attended classes regularly. The work was fulfilling, and for the first time in years, Rosalie felt valued for her intelligence and skills. Cole became a regular visitor, often bringing small gifts: a jar of honey, a book of poetry, toys he'd carved for Emma. The townsfolk noticed, of course. Mrs. Wilson gently reminded Rosalie that even as a widow, certain proprieties should be observed. "I'm not courting him," Rosalie protested, though her blush betrayed her. "Perhaps not officially," Mrs. Wilson replied with a knowing smile. "But that man rides 5 miles in the snow just to bring your daughter wooden blocks. His intentions seem clear enough to everyone but you." The first heavy snowfall came in early December. Rosalie woke to find her woodpile nearly depleted and the path to the schoolhouse buried under 3 feet of snow. As she fretted over how to manage, a knock sounded at her door. Cole stood there with a sled full of firewood and provisions. "Thought you might need these," he said, stomping snow from his boots. "The Rollins place has more than enough to spare." While Emma napped, they worked together to stack the wood and organize the supplies. In the close confines of her small house, Rosalie became acutely aware of Cole's presence: the breadth of his shoulders, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the gentle way he moved to avoid disturbing the sleeping baby. "School's likely canceled for a few days," he observed, looking out at the continuing snowfall. Rosalie nodded. "The children who live on outlying farms won't be able to make it in." "Then perhaps," Cole said, suddenly appearing nervous, "you'd permit me to call on you properly. For supper, maybe." "Tomorrow evening." Rosalie felt her cheeks warm. "I'd like that very much." Their first official courtship dinner was simple rabbit stew and biscuits, but the conversation flowed easily. Cole spoke of his childhood in Missouri, his years driving cattle, and his dreams of someday having his own horse ranch. Rosalie shared stories of her teaching days in St. Louis and her hopes of providing Emma with opportunities she herself never had. As winter settled in earnest across Montana territory, Cole's visits became the highlight of Rosalie's weeks. He taught her to shoot a rifle for protection, helped repair her roof after a particularly violent storm, and always brought special treats for Emma, who had begun to reach for him whenever he entered the room. "She thinks you hang the moon," Rosalie remarked one evening as Cole bounced the now 6-month-old on his knee, eliciting delighted giggles. "Smart girl," he replied with a wink. "Takes after her mother that way." By February, the entire town recognized their courtship as official. Cole joined Rosalie at church services, sat with her at community gatherings, and had taken to escorting her home from school each afternoon. Yet something held Rosalie back from fully embracing her feelings. Late one night, after Cole had departed following an evening of checkers by the fire, she confessed her fears to Emma as she rocked her to sleep. "I was so wrong about your father," she whispered to the drowsy infant. "What if I'm wrong again? What if Cole changes once we're married?" She paused, startled by her own presumption of marriage. "Not that he's asked yet, little one. But if he did?" March brought the first signs of spring and with it, unexpected trouble. A man named Victor Slade arrived in Pinecrest, claiming to be Thomas O'Brien's business partner. He demanded a share of any inheritance Thomas might have left behind. "Your husband borrowed heavily against future profits," he told Rosalie when he cornered her outside the schoolhouse. "I'm merely collecting what's rightfully mine." Sheriff Morgan intervened, insisting that any legitimate claims would need proper documentation and should be addressed through legal channels. But Slade's presence cast a shadow over Rosalie's newfound happiness. When Cole learned of the confrontation, his normally calm demeanor hardened. "I know Slade's type," he said grimly. "He preys on vulnerable women, inventing debts that don't exist." "What if he's telling the truth?" Rosalie worried. "Thomas was secretive about money matters." Cole took her hands in his. "Then we'll face it together, but first, let me make some inquiries." True to his word, Cole dispatched telegrams to contacts in St. Louis and waited for responses. Meanwhile, Slade took up residence at the saloon, regaling anyone who would listen with tales of Thomas O'Brien's business acumen and their supposed joint ventures. The situation came to a head one rainy afternoon in late March. Rosalie was walking home from school, Emma bundled against her chest, when Slade stepped out from between two buildings, blocking her path. "I've been patient, Mrs. O'Brien," he said, his tone menacing. "But my patience has limits. Your husband owed me $500, and I mean to collect." Rosalie clutched Emma tighter. "I've told you, Mr. Slade, I have no money. Whatever dealings you had with Thomas died with him." Slade's face darkened. "Then perhaps we can arrange another form of payment. A pretty widow like yourself has other assets." Before Rosalie could respond, Cole's voice cut through the rain. "Step away from her, Slade." Cole stood a few yards behind them, his stance wide and his hand hovering near the revolver on his hip. His usual easy-going expression was replaced by cold determination. "This isn't your concern, Reeves," Slade sneered. "This is between me and O'Brien's widow." "Anything that involves Rosalie and Emma is my concern," Cole replied evenly. "And I've received some interesting telegrams about you. Seems you've tried this same scheme in 3 other territories." Slade's hand moved toward his own weapon, but Cole was faster. In one fluid motion, he drew his revolver and aimed it squarely at Slade's chest. "I wouldn't," Cole warned. "Sheriff Morgan is right behind me, and he's mighty interested in talking to you about outstanding warrants in Wyoming territory." Sure enough, the sheriff emerged from the mist, rifle in hand. Slade, recognizing defeat, allowed himself to be disarmed and arrested without further resistance. Later that evening, as Rosalie put Emma to bed, Cole paced nervously in her small parlor. When she returned, he was standing by the window, staring out at the rain-soaked street. "Slade will be escorted to Cheyenne to face charges," he said without turning. "You won't have to worry about him anymore." "Thank you," Rosalie said softly, moving to stand beside him. "That seems inadequate for everything you've done, but I mean it with all my heart." Cole finally looked at her, his expression uncharacteristically vulnerable. "Rosalie, I need to say something, and I hope you'll hear me out." He took a deep breath. "When I found you and Emma in that prairie grass, I was just doing what any decent man would do. But these past months, watching you build a new life, seeing your strength and kindness, I've fallen in love with you." Rosalie's breath caught in her throat as Cole continued. "I know it might be too soon after Thomas, and I know taking on another man's child is asking a lot, but Emma already feels like she's mine, and you," his voice faltered, "you feel like home to me, Rosalie. Something I've been searching for my whole life." Tears welled in Rosalie's eyes. "Cole Reeves, are you proposing to me?" His smile was tender. "I am, though not very elegantly. Will you marry me, Rosalie? Let me be a father to Emma and a husband to you." Rosalie closed the distance between them, pressing her palm against his cheek. "I've been afraid to trust my heart again," she admitted. "But you've proven yourself in ways Thomas never did. Yes, I'll marry you. I love you too." Their first kiss was gentle, a promise sealed in the soft lamplight of Rosalie's parlor while rain tapped against the windows, and Emma slept peacefully in the next room. Word of their engagement spread quickly through Pinecrest. The community, which had embraced Rosalie from the beginning, now celebrated the couple's upcoming nuptials. Mrs. Wilson took charge of planning the wedding, insisting it be held in the newly completed church before the end of spring. "No sense in waiting when you've already found your match," she declared. As April turned to May, Cole completed his work at Rollins Ranch and began construction on a new home on a small parcel of land he'd purchased on the outskirts of town. It was close enough for Rosalie to continue teaching, but had enough acreage for Cole to start breeding and training horses. "It won't be much at first," he apologized as he showed Rosalie the partially framed structure, "but we'll add to it over the years." Rosalie surveyed the meadow surrounding the building site, imagining Emma running through wildflowers and perhaps other children joining her someday. "It's perfect," she assured him. "More than I ever dreamed of having again." Their wedding day dawned bright and clear on the first Saturday in June, 1876. The entire town turned out for the ceremony, filling the small church to capacity. Emma, now 9 months old and trying her first wobbly steps, was held by Mrs. Wilson, who dabbed at her eyes throughout the service. Cole had traded his usual trail clothes for a new suit purchased from the general store, while Rosalie wore a simple cream-colored dress, adorned with lace that the town's women had collectively sewn as a wedding gift. When they exchanged vows, Cole added a special promise to Emma, kneeling down to the child's level. "I pledge to be the father you deserve," he said softly, though the church was quiet enough for all to hear. "To protect you, guide you, and love you as my own from this day forward." The celebration afterward lasted well into the evening, with tables set up in the town square and everyone contributing food and drink. As twilight fell, Cole and Rosalie slipped away to the new house, which the townsmen had worked tirelessly to complete in time for the wedding. Standing on the porch of their home, Cole swept Rosalie into his arms before carrying her across the threshold. Emma, who had fallen asleep during the festivities, stirred briefly in Rosalie's arms before settling against her mother's shoulder. "Welcome home, Mrs." Reeves, Cole whispered, kissing Rosalie's forehead tenderly. Rosalie's heart swelled with gratitude and love. Less than a year ago, she had knelt in the prairie grass, alone and desperate, with a crying baby and little hope of survival. Now she stood in the doorway of a home built with love, beside a man whose compassion had saved not just her life, but her faith in humanity. "I never imagined finding happiness like this again," she confessed as Cole lit the lamps, illuminating their new home simple but solid, with furnishings contributed by friends and neighbors. "Sometimes I wonder if I deserve it." Cole set down the lamp and took both Rosalie and Emma into his embrace. "You deserve everything good this world has to offer," he said firmly, "and I intend to spend the rest of my life making sure you both know how cherished you are." In the years that followed, the Reeves family prospered. Cole's horse breeding business gained a reputation for quality across 3 territories, while Rosalie continued teaching until their family expanded with the birth of twin boys in 1878. Emma grew into a confident young woman who inherited her mother's intelligence and her adoptive father's kindness. The story of how they met became family legend, retold at gatherings and celebrations. How a baby's cry in the wilderness had led Cole to Rosalie. How he had taken off his coat, wrapped it around a desperate mother and child, and lifted them both from the prairie grass and into his heart. On their 20th wedding anniversary, as they sat on the porch of their now expanded home watching their grandchildren play in the same meadow where Cole had once promised to build Rosalie a life, he took her hand and kissed it gently. "Best decision I ever made," he said, following the sound of Emma's cries that day. Rosalie leaned against his shoulder, still strong despite the passing years. "Providence works in mysterious ways," she replied. "I was praying for rescue, but I found so much more." As the Montana sunset painted the sky in brilliant hues of orange and purple, their hands remained intertwined, a simple gesture that spoke of a love born from compassion, nurtured through hardship, and sustained by unwavering devotion through all the seasons of their lives together.